Today we end the book of Numbers with the stroke of a sword and a question. We're going to consider the fate of those sent by God. From the plains of Moab to the courts of kings, we'll follow a trail of rejection, demanded silence, and often violence. Join me to uncover what Scripture and history reveal about what happened to those who dared speak for God. Who killed the prophets? Good morning, Shabbat Shalom, and welcome. I'm Ross, and I'm live from the Athenaeum in Jackson, Louisiana, home of Horeb Institute for the historical and objective research and exploration of the Bible. Thank you very much for joining me today for my class, Who Killed the Prophets? We're working through the Pentateuch. In the annual cycle of readings, the life and laws of Moses, this is the final class for the book of Numbers, and we're working through the final two Torah portions, and those Torah portions are Matote-Masei. If you have our Torah tablet for the book of Numbers, it's going to cover the material between Numbers chapter 30 and verse 2, which is on page 220, and Numbers chapter 36, verse 13, which is on page 266. Again, the class, Who Killed the Prophets? We're at the end of the book of Numbers. In our last episode, we uncovered the death of Moses and the end of the Torah story. And we did this, you might think, hopefully you've heard this class from last week, but you might be thinking, wait a minute, how could you end the Torah story? You'll have to go back and listen to that if you missed it, because we pulled together text from the book of Numbers and the book of Deuteronomy. Namely, we looked at passages from Numbers chapter 20, Numbers chapter 27, Deuteronomy chapter 3, chapter 31, chapter 32, and chapter 34, all of which were brought together to bring about the idea that these texts, written different sources, are telling the same story about the end of the days of Moses and the end of the Torah. Now, one of the things that I noted in the class last week is that there is a narrative break. And that narrative break begins in the book of Numbers chapter 25. I want you to begin with me there. So go with me to Numbers 25, verse 16 through 19. That's on page 188 if you do have the Torah tablet. And we're going to begin again in verse 16. Again, this is the ASV, so I use the English translation Jehovah for the Tetragrammaton. And Jehovah spake unto Moses, saying, Vex the Midianites, some translations say harass, and smite them, for they vex you with their wiles, wherewith they have beguiled you in the matter of Peor, and in the matter of Cosbi, the daughter of the prince of Midian, their sister, who was slain on the day of the plague in the matter of Peor. And it came to pass after the plague, and then it stops. And then there's a white space. So what I want to point out is, and those who study the text, it even looks odd in English, but if you look at it in Hebrew, you'll recognize that this is a clear break in the narrative. Now, many people will just pick up at the next verse, chapter 26, verse 1, that Jehovah spake unto Moses, unto Eleazar, and so forth. So in other words, they read that as a continuous narrative. And it came to pass after the plague, that Jehovah spake unto Moses and unto Eleazar. But in the Hebrew, it's clearly a break. And what we then encounter in this particular passage after the break is we feel an interruption. We feel an interruption because chapter 26 through 30 seem out of place. If you pick up chapter 26, it deals with all of a sudden there is another census, right? And you work through Numbers 26, you got the census there, you go all the way through, you get to Numbers chapter 27, I'm just hitting the highlights. Numbers chapter 27 has this issue with the daughters of Zelophehad, and the distribution of the land and so forth. So you work through all of that. Then you get to this strange passage about the end of the days for Moses. Chapters 28 and chapters 29 both deal with some sacrificial and festival elements which seem out of place. Chapter 30 deals with chapter 30 deals with vows and so forth, legislation concerning vows. And then all of a sudden, chapter 31 feels like it welcomes you back into the narrative with, it almost could say, and as I was saying, and then we pick up in chapter 31. That's what I want to do now. I want to go to chapter 31, verse 1, page 224, and lay the groundwork for what we want to talk about today, beginning in verse 1. Again, Numbers 31, verse 1, page 224. And Jehovah spake unto Moses, saying, avenge the children of Israel of the Midianites. Again, this is back to 25:19. Afterward shalt thou be gathered unto thy people. And Moses spake unto the people, saying, arm ye men from among you for the war, that they may go against Midian, to execute Jehovah's vengeance on Midian. Of every tribe 1,000 throughout all the tribes of Israel shall ye send to the war. So there were delivered out of the thousands of Israel 1,000 of every tribe, 12,000 armed for war. Moses sent them 1,000 of every tribe to the war, them and Pinchas, the son of Eleazar the priest, to the war with the vessels of the sanctuary and the trumpets for the alarm in his hand. And they warred against Midian as Jehovah commanded Moses, and they slew every male. They slew the kings of Midian with the rest of their slain, Evi and Rechem and Zur and Hur and Reba, the 5 kings of Midian. Balaam also, the son of Beor, they slew with the sword. Balaam, the son of Beor, they slew with the sword. Wait a minute. Balaam is a bad guy? Balaam is bad? Why is Balaam killed? We're going to talk about that today. Clearly, when we read what is called in rabbinic literature and other ancient sources the book of Balaam, meaning chapters 22 through 24, what we see is a man, a seer, someone that communicates with God. He communicates with the God, not just some other God, but he communicates with the same God that the ancient people of Israel communicate with. He clearly hears from that God. He sees visions from that God. He called his God Yod-Heh-Vav-Heh, however you want to translate that. And he said many times to those who sought to bring him to curse Israel at the behest of Balak, he said he can't go beyond what was permitted by God. So this is a very strange thing. If you read chapter 20 through 22 through 24, no one, now I know some of you are saying, yes, we know what's in the mind of Balaam. We know that he was sneaky and deceptive, and you don't get that in chapters 22 through 24, and we're going to look closely at this today, so stick with me. When I read this, when anyone reads it objectively, the story is very straightforward. Balaam doesn't demonstrate, doesn't display any desire to do anything beyond what the heavens, what God tells him to do. And what happens is he issues a series of blessings. He's asked to curse, but he doesn't curse. He only blesses Israel. I want you to go with me to chapter 24 of Numbers, verses 10 through 14. That's on page 182 of the Torah tablet. We're going to begin in verse 10. And Balak's anger was kindled against Balaam, and he smote his hands together. And Balak said unto Balaam, I called thee to curse mine enemies, and behold, thou hast altogether blessed them these 3 times. Therefore now flee thou to thy place. I thought to promote thee unto great honor, but lo, Jehovah hath kept thee back from honor. Balaam said to Balak, spake I not also to thy messengers that you sentest unto me, saying, if Balak would give me his house full of silver and gold, I cannot go beyond the word of Jehovah to do either good or bad of mine own hand. What Jehovah speaketh, that will I speak. And now, behold, I go unto my people. Come, and I'll advertise thee what this people shall do to thy people in the latter days. So what follows this, in other words, I want you to see, Balak says, I sought to give you great honor. All you had to do was curse Israel. And Balaam says, I can't do anything except what is allowed by Jehovah. He's telling, according to the narrative, he's telling Balak, the king of Moab, that he is answering and giving forth only that which Jehovah allows him to speak. Balak is incredibly mad, says, you got to go home. And he says, okay, I'm going to tell you what's going to happen. And then we get from 15 to 24, we get three more, we get another full set of blessings. So he blesses him. Balak says, you blessed him 3 times, and now he's going to bless him some more. And then according to all that we know, Balaam goes home. So the reader is left confused. Again, at this point, now I know some of you say, well, we got to get ahead in the story. Hang on, we're getting there. But here's what I want you to know. If we read the story, we have to see that this is, according to the narrative, Balaam is only doing what God allows him to do. Now, I want you to go with me to the book of Micah, chapter 6. Micah, chapter 6, and verse 5. Micah, chapter 6, and verse 5. O my people, remember now what King Balak of Moab devised, and what Balaam son of Beor answered him, and what happened from Shittim to Gilgal, that you may know the saving acts of the Lord. So what it says there is, in order to understand the righteousnesses of God, you got to know 2 things. Balak intended bad for the people of Israel, and Balaam answered him something else. What did Balaam answer him? Balak represents bad. Balaam, according to the writer here in Micah, represents good. Okay, now go back with me to the book of Numbers, chapter 31. We're going to pick up in verse 9, page 224. Page 224. And the children of Israel took captive the women of Midian and their little ones and all their cattle and all their flocks and all their goods they took for a prey, and all their cities and the places wherein they dwelt and all their encampments they burnt with fire. And they took all the spoil and all the prey, both of man and of beast, and they brought the captives and the prey and the spoil unto Moses and unto Eleazar the priest and unto the congregation of the children of Israel, unto the camp at the plains of Moab, which are by the Jordan at Jericho. So you see, they've gone out, they've done the attack, the initial attack, they brought back, they burned everything down, they took spoil, they got the captives and so forth. Now they're back. Now look, I want you to pick up in verse 13. And Moses and Eleazar the priest and all the princes of the congregation went forth to meet them without the camp. And Moses was wroth with the officers of the host, the captains of thousands and the captains of hundreds, who came from the service of the war. And Moses said unto them, have ye saved all the women alive? Behold, these caused the children of Israel through the counsel of Balaam to commit trespass against Jehovah in the matter of Peor, and so the plague was among the children, the congregation of Jehovah. The counsel of Balaam, the counsel of Balaam. Now, this seems to suggest that there is a hidden something unknown that's hidden from us. Commercial break. The counsel of Balaam. Now, the whole point in this particular passage seems to suggest, if we look at this passage, that the counsel of Balaam seems to reveal that there is something underneath the surface, something unknown that Balaam did to lead the children of Israel astray. So this particular story is odd. It certainly isn't revealed in chapters 22 through 24. And as I was taking my notes and studying this, I was reminded, some of you may not know who Flip Wilson is. The devil made me do it. It reminded me of that. Can a person actually devise a plan and this person is blamed for the sins of others? Did Balaam do something that forced these otherwise innocent children of Israel to go and commit sexual immorality with Midianite women? Let's pick it up in verse 17. Verse 17 says, "Now therefore, kill every male among the little ones, and kill every woman that hath known man by lying with him. But all the women children that have not known man by lying with him, keep alive for yourselves." Moses, according to this text, Moses is angry that the women were spared. And according to this text, it's referred to as a harem text. They're sent back with the command to utterly slay everyone, the only ones allowed to live. The ASV calls women children. The NRSV says young girls. Wow. This is tough. This is a tough story. And I believe that people who read and seek to live their lives according to this text, these texts, plural, ought to take pause here. We don't have to say that something is okay. And this is problemsome. This is a very big problem. The Hebrew is hataf hanashim, the young women, the girl women. It means little girls who had not known or slept with a male. They're told, keep for yourselves. And we're going to leave that aside for a moment. We're going to go to the book of Joshua. Go to the book of Joshua with me. Joshua chapter 13 and verse 22. Joshua 13 and verse 22 says the following. We're still following this Balaam. 13:22 says, "Along with the rest of those they put to death, the Israelites also put to the sword Balaam, son of Beor, who practiced divination." Now, I think a lot of people, when they read this, say, well, there you go. They killed him because he practiced divination. So we're going to talk just a few minutes about this. Divination in the Hebrew is kof samek mem. Kosame is the root word. It occurs 35 times in 29 verses, and I'm going to consider a couple of these. I want you to go with me to the book of Numbers chapter 22 and verse 7. It's on page 166. 166, Numbers 22, 7. And the elders of Moab and the elders of Midian departed with the rewards of divination in their hand, and they came back unto Balaam and spake unto him the words of Balak. So the first thing I want to point out is we already know what Joshua 13:22 says. We know this to be a fact, that Balaam was known as a diviner. Now, later in the Hebrew Bible, divination, particularly Deuteronomy 18, so forth, texts that fall under the Deuteronomic law code, we see that that's forbidden. But this idea of divination, we already knew in the story. It says right here that the elders sent to fetch Balaam with rewards of divination. So we knew that in the story. Now look at 23:23, page 178. Numbers 23:23, I want to show you something else. One of the things that Balaam says when he is blessing the children of Israel, in one of his many blessings, is surely there is no enchantment with Jacob, neither is there any divination with Israel. Now shall it be said of Jacob and of Israel, what hath God wrought? So, Balaam was paid, we saw this earlier, was paid to divine against Israel. In other words, to bring a curse against the children of Israel. But there is no indication in chapters 22 to 24 that Balaam ever had any underlying intent to do anything beyond what he was allowed. And even Balak says that. So where do we get this idea? Well, we certainly get it from later literature. Let me give you an example of a couple of texts, later texts, which do have this story that differs from what we see in Numbers chapter 22 through 24. The first one is in Josephus in the Antiquities of the Jews. It's in book 4 and chapter 6 if you use the old style of numbering, but it's paragraphs 126 to 130. I'm just going to read just a little bit of this, and we're going to pick up sort of where the Bible leaves off in chapter 24 of Numbers. But Balak, being very angry that the Israelites were not cursed, sent away Balaam without thinking him worthy of an honor. Whereupon, when he was just upon his journey in order to pass the Euphrates, he sent for Balak and for the princes of the Midianites, and he spake thus to them. O Balak, and you Midianites that are here present, for I am obliged, even without the will of God, to gratify you. See, that's in parentheses. It is true, no entire destruction can seize upon the nation of the Hebrews, neither by war, nor by plague, nor by scarcity of the fruits of the earth, nor can any other unexpected accident be their entire ruin. For the providence of God is concerned to preserve them from such a misfortune. Nor will it permit any such calamity to come upon them whereby they may all perish, but some small misfortunes, and those for a short time, whereby they may appear to be brought low, may still befall them, but after that they will flourish again, to the terror of those that brought those mischiefs upon them. So if you have a mind to gain a victory over them for a short space of time, you will obtain it by following my directions. Do you, therefore, set out the handsomest of such of your daughters as are most eminent for beauty and proper to force and conquer the modesty of those that behold them. These decked and trimmed to the highest degree you are able. Then do you send them to be near the Israelites' camp and give them in charge, that when the young men of the Hebrews desire their company, they allow it to them. And it goes on and it says, basically, use these beautiful women and entice the men, and then once they take the women and they fall in love, because these are beautiful women, that then they're going to say, you've got to come with me. And the women are going to say, look, we would go with you, but you have to renounce your gods and you have to practice our religion and so forth. And so this is supposedly the plot of Balaam that is mentioned but not talked about or not described in the book of Numbers, chapter 31. It's very interesting that this is one of the main sources where this comes from, and it's a very late source. We just simply know that Balaam is charged with this crime that we don't know anything about in 22 through 24. Now, it ends, the book of Balaam, as far as we know, in chapters 22 through 24, ends with the idea that Balak is mad that he hired him to curse, and he didn't curse. And he blessed Israel, so he sends him away. That's the end. Joshua mentions divination, but we already know about that. We read that in Numbers chapter 22. Micah knows only of Balak's bad intent, but Balaam answering him in another way. And the way that Balaam answers him is proof that God's on their side. See? Now, in much later literature, or about the same time as we get with Josephus, we see the book of Jude. Jude mentions that Balaam's error is the forsake of gain, the book of Jude in the New Testament. 2 Peter 2:15 has Balaam's love of wages, of doing wrong. But see, none of them seem to go along with what we find in Josephus. Now look with me in Revelation. We're going to look at Revelation chapter 2 and verse 15. I'm pulling out all the stops today. I want to bring in passages from several different sources, several different to converge to make the point. Verse 15 verse 14 of chapter 2 in Revelation. But I have a few things against you. You have some there who hold to the teaching of Balaam, who taught Balak to put a stumbling block before the people of Israel so that they would eat food sacrificed to idols and practice fornication. So this seems to go pretty much in what we read in the book of Josephus, so you can compare those. As far as the documentary hypothesis, as far as the scholars have come to understand this, those who accept the documentary hypothesis, they would say that P records that Balaam died at the hands of troops discharged by Moses, which comes from a command from God. That's the way P would present it in chapter 31 of the book of Numbers. The same troops that killed Balaam with the sword also killed all Midianites, according to this source, except for the young girl virgins. And we know that we encounter Midianites after that. So you have to ask yourself, what happened here? But the killing of Balaam got me thinking, what other prophets are killed in the Bible? And who killed them? Who killed the prophets? Now, one might think that Balaam had it coming to him because he practiced divination and he had some sort of hidden ulterior motive, and therefore he was killed. But I want you to go with me this morning to Nehemiah chapter 9. Nehemiah chapter 9, and I just want to pick up a passage here that I think is important in our current study, Nehemiah chapter 9, and we're going to go to verse 26. This is considered the prayer, part of the prayer of Ezra. Nehemiah chapter 9, verse 26 is part of the prayer. In fact, it begins in verse 6. I'll just hit this. And Ezra said, "You are the Lord, you alone, you've made heaven," and so forth. When you get to verse 26, it says, after listing all sorts of things that God has done on behalf of Israel, it says, "Nevertheless, They were disobedient and rebelled against you and cast your law behind their backs and killed your prophets who had warned them in order to turn them back to you. And they committed great blasphemies. And they committed great blasphemies. Now, they slew your prophets. Who is the they in Nehemiah chapter 9, verse 26? Who slew? Now, one of the most notorious prophet slayers in the Hebrew Bible is a woman by the name of Jezebel, the queen of Israel. She is what I guess you could call the wicked queen of the north. Wicked queen of the north, meaning the northern kingdom of Israel. We meet her in 1 Kings chapter 16, verse 31. She is, we are told, the daughter of the Sidonian king Ethbaal. She marries Ahab, the evil one, in 1 Kings chapter 16 and verse 30. Now, when we get to chapter 18 of 1 Kings, we read of Jezebel killing off the prophets. I want you to go with me to 1 Kings 18 and verse 4. 1 Kings 18 and verse 4. We're going to begin here just to look at one of the famous or infamous prophet slayers. 18 and 4 says, let me go back to verse 3. Ahab summoned Obadiah, who was in charge of the palace. Now, Obadiah revered the Lord greatly. When Jezebel was killing off the prophets of the Lord, Obadiah took 100 prophets, hid them 50 to a cave, and provided them with bread and water. Look at verse 13. Has it not been told, my Lord, what I did when Jezebel killed the prophets of the Lord, how I hid 100 of the Lord's prophets, 50 to a cave, and provided them with bread and water? So what we see here is that during the reign of Ahab, and his wicked wife Jezebel, whose name is still synonymous with evil and bad and wickedness, they were killing the prophets. Literally, it says cutting them off. This sets up a big showdown in the Bible on Mount Carmel. If you go with me to Israel on any of my tours, it's almost without exception that we go to Mount Carmel. And this story is very interesting. So look with me at 1 Kings 18 and verse 19. Let's begin here as we work through. Now, therefore, have all Israel assemble for me, this is Elijah the prophet, at Mount Carmel with the 450 prophets of Baal and the 400 prophets of Asherah who eat at Jezebel's table. So what we get here is that according to this narrative in the Elijah cycle of readings, that the prophets of Baal and Asherah, that's big business. 400 of one, 450 of the other. And as you know, there's the story of how this is set forward, and he makes this challenge, and they're going to set up 2 sacrificial places and bring the water. You remember the whole story. Now, what I want to draw out is look at verse 22. Elijah said to the people, even I only am left a prophet of the Lord, but Baal's prophets number 450. That sets the stage for the showdown. Now, verse 40 says the following. Elijah said to them, seize the prophets of Baal, don't let one of them escape. And they seized them, and Elijah brought them down to the Wadi Kishon and killed them there. Now, I find it interesting. This is just on my way to make another point, but I wanted to say that notice that he kills, according to the narrative here, 450 prophets of Baal, but there's no mention of what happens to the 400 prophets of Asherah. We have to assume what happened to them. We just don't get it in the text. Now I want you to look at chapter 19 and verse 1 of 1 Kings. 19 verse 1, Ahab told Jezebel all that Elijah had done and how he had killed all the prophets with the sword. And then, you know the story, Jezebel sends word to Elijah that come morning light, you're going to be just like one of them. I'm going to kill you. Elijah flees. And this is where we pick up our story in verse 8. 1 Kings 19, verse 8. He got up, meaning Elijah. He ate and drank, and he went in the strength of that food 40 days and 40 nights to Horeb, the Mount of God. At that place he came to a cave and spent the night there. The word of the Lord came to him, saying, "What are you doing here, Elijah?" And he answered, "I've been very zealous for the Lord, the God of hosts, for the Israelites have forsaken your covenant, thrown down your altars, and killed your prophets with the sword. I alone am left, and they are seeking my life to take it away." Look down at verse 13. Now, by the way, he has several encounters, and each time a manifestation appears to him, the Lord, as we read, Yod-Heh-Vav-Heh, he answers the same. He's asked the same question. What are you doing here? He answers it the same. So if we pick up in 13, then came a voice to him, part B, and said, "What are you doing here, Elijah?" And he answered, "I've been very zealous for the Lord, the God of hosts, for the Israelites have forsaken your covenant, thrown down your altars, killed your prophets with the sword. I alone am left, and they're seeking my life to take it away." Interesting. Now, what this tells us is that Elijah was not told to flee there. He flees there out of fear. We have to ask ourselves, was that what he was supposed to do? Because if you follow the story beginning in verse 15, as one of my teachers put it years ago, it appears that Elijah gets served notice that he's fired. He's going to anoint someone else king, and he's going to anoint Elisha in his stead. Very interesting. We'll have to talk about that in the after-class discussion. So we've got Jezebel and Ahab are prophet killers. They're killing, according to Elijah, the prophets of the Lord. These are good prophets. Because you might question, well, I know that there was a supposed killing of Balaam, but he had it coming to him. But did these prophets? And who is that that's killing them? It's not the Sidonians, right? Now, I want you to go, we're going to fast forward. We're going to fast forward to the book of Jeremiah. I want you to go with me to Jeremiah chapter 2. Jeremiah chapter 2, and I just want to pick up a single verse there on our way. Jeremiah chapter 2 and verse 30. "In vain I have struck down your children, they accepted no correction. Your own sword devoured your prophets." Now, contextually, Israel is being addressed. Remember, Jeremiah is in the south. He is with the kingdom of Judah. And we, if you followed our course on Jeremiah a year or so ago, you recognize that not everything's in order. But this is at least at some point in the 40-year period leading up to the destruction of the first temple, Jeremiah is a prophet. We get the reign of the kings during which he prophesied in the beginning of the book. But here he says that your own sword, Israel's sword, Judah's sword, has killed the prophets. So if someone said Balaam had it coming to him, the northern queen of Jezebel was really a Sidonian princess, and then she's a queen because she marries a king, but that king's in the north kingdom. Everybody knows that the kingdom of the north was bad, but this is in Judah. So we get this idea, and Jeremiah is going to give us a lot of information for our class. We're going to consider some things that I think are interesting. Jeremiah chapter 7 and Jeremiah chapter 26. record different parts of what is known as a temple sermon, where Jeremiah is told to go stand in the temple of the Lord, and he's to proclaim a message. And part of that message is that the temple, beloved as it is, remember in the time of Josiah, during the ministry of Jeremiah, Josiah is king, and he does a great reformation and restoration of the temple. But here, Jeremiah is going to say, your temple is going to be destroyed. Everybody say, uh-oh, because there are a lot of people, even today, who are cheering on the rebuilding of the temple. But there are prophets, according to the text of the Bible that we study, which stood against the temple. This being one of those cases. In chapter 7 and chapter 26, this is at the beginning of the reign of Jehoiakim, right? And Jeremiah brings forward some very troubling news which upsets the people of his day, particularly the religious and political leaders of his time. I want you to go with me to Jeremiah chapter 26, beginning in verse 7. Jeremiah 26, beginning in verse 7. This is after Jeremiah brings back this pretty troubling word of the Lord. Verse 7, the priest and the prophets and all the people heard Jeremiah speaking these words in the house of the Lord. And when Jeremiah had finished speaking all that the Lord had commanded him to speak to all the people, then the priest and the prophets and all the people laid hold of him and said, you shall die. Why have you prophesied in the name of the Lord, saying, this house shall be like Shiloh, this city shall be desolate without inhabitant? And all the people gathered around Jeremiah in the house of the Lord. And when the officials of Judah heard these things, they came up from the king's house to the house of the Lord and took their seat in the entry of the new gate of the house of the Lord. The priest and the prophet said to the officials and to all the people, this man deserves the sentence of death because he's prophesied against this city, as you've heard with your own ears. Jeremiah spoke to all the officials and all the people, saying, it is the Lord who sent me to prophesy against this house and this city, all the words you've heard. Now, therefore, amend your ways and your doings and obey the voice of the Lord your God, and the Lord will change his mind about the disaster that he's pronounced against you. But as for me, here I am in your hands. Do with me as seems good and right to you. Only know for certain that if you put me to death, you will bring innocent blood on yourselves and on this city and its inhabitants. For in truth, the Lord sent me to you to speak these words in your ears. Then the officials and all the people said to the priest and the prophets, this man doesn't deserve the sentence of death, for he's spoken to us in the name of the Lord our God. And some of the elders of the land arose and said to all the assembled people, Micah of Moresheth, who prophesied during the days of King Hezekiah of Judah, said to all the people of Judah, thus says the Lord of hosts, Zion shall be plowed as a field, Jerusalem shall become a heap of ruins, and the mountain of the house a wooded height. Did King Hezekiah of Judah and all Judah actually put him to death? Did he not fear the Lord and entreat the favor of the Lord? Did not the Lord change his mind about the disaster that he had pronounced against him? We're about to bring great disaster on ourselves. So let me set this a little bit better. Jeremiah stood up and said, this house will be destroyed if you don't repent. And the people, the religious and political leaders, said, kill him. You heard it with your own ears. He spoke against this place and the city and the temple. He barely escaped death at the hands of his own people for prophesying the demise of the temple. And the only thing that saved him was that someone in there, or someone's, remembered the story of another prophet 100 some odd years before who had made the same pronouncement, and they repented. So now you're telling me that we had two prophets back to back within basically a century that predicted that the temple is going to be destroyed, and there was a a near death. They almost killed these prophets. You say, well, Ross, that's almost. It doesn't count. But turn the page. Turn the page. Now we're going to look at verse 20 through 24. Jeremiah didn't die, right? So get this. Verse 20, there was another man prophesying in the name of the Lord, Uriah, son of Shemaiah, from Kiriath Yearim. He prophesied against this city and against this land in words exactly like those of Jeremiah. And when King Jehoiakim and all his warriors and all his officials heard his words, the king sought to put him to death. But when Uriah heard of it, he was afraid and fled and escaped to Egypt. And King Jehoiakim sent Elnathan, son of Akbor, and men with him to Egypt. And they took Uriah from Egypt and brought him to King Jehoiakim, who struck him down with the sword and threw his dead body into the burial place of the common people. But the hand of Ahikam, son of Shaphan, was with Jeremiah so that he was not given over into the hands of the people to be put to death. Jeremiah, his life hangs in the balance. They want him dead. You better hear me. Uriah didn't have the protection that Jeremiah had. He fled to Egypt, and the wicked political and religious leaders chased him down, brought him back, hacked him to death, and threw his dead body. Who did this? The people of God. Go with me to 2 Chronicles chapter 24. 2 Chronicles 24 and verse 20. 2 Chronicles 24, beginning in verse 20, says the following. Then the Spirit of God took possession of Zechariah, son of the priest Jehoiada. He stood above the people and said to them, thus says God, why do you transgress the commandments of the Lord so that you cannot prosper? Because you've forsaken the Lord, he has also forsaken you. But they conspired against him, and by command of the king, what king? Whose king? They stoned him to death in the court of the house of the Lord. King Jehoash, some translations say Joash, did not remember the kindness that Jehoiada, Zechariah's father, had shown him, but killed his son. As he was dying, he said, may the Lord see and avenge. Ladies and gentlemen, this is a prophet named Zechariah who stood up and was murdered in Jerusalem. And by the way, this seems to be the Zechariah that the Gospels have Jesus mention. Go with me to the Gospel of Luke. By the way, if some of you have been listening to me for about 15 years and they said, wait a minute, what's going on here? Ross is using the New Testament. You better get ready. Luke chapter 11, beginning in verse 47. And it says, woe to you, for you build the tomb of the prophets, the tombs of the prophets, whom your ancestors killed. Now, I can't tell you how many times I've heard people say, the Jewish people didn't kill their prophets. This gospel stuff has got things all wrong. No, they killed their prophets. Look at this, verse 48. So you're witnesses and approve of the deeds of your ancestors, for they killed them and you build their tombs. Therefore, also the wisdom of God said, I will send them prophets and apostles, some of whom they will kill and persecute, so that this generation may be charged with the blood of all the prophets shed since the foundation of the world, from the blood of Abel to the blood of Zechariah, who perished between the altar and the sanctuary. Yes, I tell you, we will be charged against this generation. It seems that the gospel writer of Luke, who, according to the intro, has investigated a lot of sources, has Jesus talking about the Zechariah that we're reading about, that we just read about in 2nd Chronicles. Now, Matthew's gospel, believe me, I'm honest with the text here. So when we have difficulties or problems in the text, I point them out. Go with me to Matthew 23, beginning in verse 29. The similar story according to Matthew's version. Woe to you, scribes and Pharisees, hypocrites! For you build the tombs of the prophets and decorate the graves of the righteous, and you say, if we had lived in the days of our ancestors, we would not have taken part with them in shedding the blood of the prophets. Thus you testify against yourself that you're descendants of those who murdered the prophets. Fill up then the measure of your ancestors, you snake, you brood of vipers. How can you escape being sentenced to hell? Therefore I send you prophets, sages, and scribes, some of whom you'll kill and crucify, some you'll flog in your synagogues and pursue from town to town, so that upon you may come all the righteous blood shed on earth, from the blood of righteous Abel to the blood of Zachariah, son of Barachiah, whom you murdered between the sanctuary and the altar. Truly I tell you, all this will come upon this generation. Jerusalem, Jerusalem, the city that kills the prophets and stones those who are sent to it. How often I desired to gather your children together as a hen gathers her brood under her wings, and you were not willing. Your house is left to you desolate. Your house is left to you desolate. For I tell you, you will not see me again until you say, Baruch haba b'shem Adonai. Blessed is the one who comes in the name of the Lord. This text seemingly has a mistake, because it refers to the Zechariah who's killed, which we read about in 2nd Chronicles 24, as the son, Zechariah, son of Barachiah. And that does not seem to match what we have in our sources. But the bottom line is, whether you agree in the veracity of this text or if Jesus said this or not, 2nd Chronicles says that the political and religious leaders slaughtered a prophet by the name of Zechariah, right? Get his name right, but still. Now look with me one more time. Let's go back to Luke, and I want to pick up in chapter 13, Luke 13, verse 33. Who killed the prophets? Verse 33. Yet today, tomorrow, and the next day, I must be on my way, because it's impossible for a prophet to be killed outside of Jerusalem. This is, according to the text, Jesus is saying it's got to happen here. Why would he say that? Because that's where it happens often. Jerusalem, Jerusalem, the city that kills the prophets and stones those who are sent to it. How often have I desired to gather your children together as a hen gathers her brood under her wings, and you were not willing. Your house is left to you, and I tell you, you will not see me again until the time comes when you say, Baruch haba b'shem Adonai. Blessed is the one who comes in the name of the Lord. Now, by the way, if you want to start getting ready for a major study of the Gospels from a historical, critical view, just like we did and are doing with the Pentateuch, you need to get my Gospel Index. It's available to all of our Yakad members as a way of saying thank you. You know where to get it. It's 32 pages, and it shows the synoptics and John according to a very structured approach. So if you haven't gotten that yet, you got to get it. It's going to be very helpful. Now, similar language to what I've read here in these gospel texts is available to us. It's present in another text known as 2nd Esdras, chapter 1. Now, if you have the Bible that I often recommend for the best overall study Bible, the New Oxford Annotated Bible with the Apocrypha, NRSV from Oxford, 5th edition. The link it's in the description below. If you had that Bible, some of you do, go with me to page 1710 so I can read this particular passage. Thus says, this is from 2nd Esdras 1:28. Thus says the Lord Almighty, have I not entreated you as a father entreats his sons, or a mother her daughters, or a nurse her children, so that you should be my people and I should be your God, and that you should be my children and I should be your father? I gathered you as a hen gathers her chicks under her wings. But now what shall I do to you? I'll cast you out from my presence. When you offer oblations to me, I'll turn my face from you, for I've rejected your festal days, new moons, and circumcisions. I sent you, my servants, the prophets, but you've taken and killed them and torn their bodies in pieces, and I will require their blood of you. Man, per the Bible, per the Hebrew Bible, God does nothing unless he reveals his secret counsel to his servants, the prophets. That's Amos chapter 3, verse 7. In other words, if God's going to do something, he's going to give that message to the prophets to warn the people, to tell them what's coming. And it looks like, quite often, that's a dangerous job. Those who are given a word from God, who are commanded to tell that word, are told to be silent, and at times they're persecuted and even hacked to death with a sword, not from an enemy, but from the people with whom God has covenanted himself. There's a passage in Amos where Amos is told by the king, don't come up here and give us that prophecy stuff. You better go down to Judah and tell them. And Amos says, hold on just a second. I'm paraphrasing. This is the Ross version. He says, hold on just a second. I didn't ask for this job. I was a cowboy. I was taking care of the sycamore trees. And the Lord told me, go tell them, thus says the Lord. So here I am. But it doesn't go well for those who speak in the name of God. From the time that Israel came out of Egypt, God sent his servants, the prophets. It says over and over, I found this phrase in the Hebrew, the English translation of which is rising early and sending. So he's not only sending the prophets day after day, week after week, month after month, year after year, decade after decade, century after century, on and on and on and on. He's sending them to say, Koamar Hashem, thus says the name, God, Yodhe-Vav-He. They didn't listen. The people with whom God made covenant did not listen. I've heard some say, you don't think we would recognize and accept a true prophet if they came? And my answer to that is no, I don't. You didn't, you haven't, you probably won't. At times, they killed Nehemiah 9:26. In the days of Hezekiah, one prophet predicted the temple's destruction. Micah chapter 3, verse 12. Micah of Moresheth. He said, this Temple Mount will be like a plowed field. There won't be a temple standing here. You know what? If you go to Israel with me, I'll take you on that mountain. There's no temple. Jeremiah 26. Jeremiah, following in the footsteps of Micah, also says that God's going to tear this down. You know what? The only reason they didn't kill him is because when they wanted to kill Micah 100 years before, the people repented. But he barely survived. Micah and Jeremiah barely survived, but you know what? Uriah was not so blessed, not so lucky, not so fortunate, because he was chased down, drugged back, and hacked to death. 200 years before the fall of the first temple, we're talking about the time of the king named Jehoash. This is during which the prophet Zechariah is killed. This happened to follow a renovation of the house of the Lord. It was nicely redone. In fact, one of my side projects, I'm working on an inscription that was discovered in 2002. A funeral was taking place in Jerusalem, according to the story, and a rectangular dark stone tablet measuring 31 by 25 by 9 centimeters, which for the rest of us, it would be 12.2 by 9.8 by 3.5 inches, was discovered. It's known as the Jehoash inscription. I'm reading today from a book called The Geoarchaeology of Israel by Howard R. Feldman. He takes the case and follows it through. A lot of people claimed, a lot of the experts claim that this was a forgery. Many experts now question that, whether you think I'm an expert or not. I consider it, I'm reading every bit of a 7-year court case. I've got everything. I'm talking, I'm interviewing people in the land of Israel, very, very important archaeologists who believe that this is authentic. The Jehoash inscription. Here's what it says on page 29 and 30 of the Geoarchaeology of Israel. Now, this has been reconstructed. There are some gaps in the text, but not many. I am Jehoash, son of Ahaziah, king of Judah, and I executed the repairs. When men's hearts became replete with generosity in the densely populated land, in the sparsely populated steppe, and in all the cities of Judah, to donate money for the sacred contributions abundantly in order to purchase quarry stone and juniper wood and Edomite copper from the city of Adam, and in order to perform the work faithfully without corruption. Then I renovated the breaches of the temple and of the surrounding walls and the storied structure and the meshwork and the winding stairs and the recesses and the doors. May this inscribed stone become this day a witness that the work has succeeded, and may God thus ordain his people with a blessing. But the same people, the same king, and by the way, that's an interesting inscription, written in ancient Paleo. The same people who were with their lips dedicating renovations to the God of heaven, hacking prophets to death with the sword. During his days, Zechariah was murdered on the heels of a great renovation of the temple. Well, that was the first temple. On the heels of Herod's great renovated house, the temple was redone in the days of Herod. Jesus of Nazareth, too, was murdered. According to our records, Jesus predicted that that temple would be destroyed. And listen to me, when I tell you that if someone declares the temple will fall, will be destroyed, that puts them on a collision course with the religious leaders. They will say, this man hath declared the temple will fall. He must die, and die he did. As it turns out, both temples were destroyed in the Hebrew month of Av. Some people, according to tradition, say both temples were destroyed on the 9th of Av. But we know from sources that that's close. The 7th and the 10th, and it's that same few day period where the temples both fell. Ladies and gentlemen, we're in that period. Very, very soon, many people, you'll see it all over Facebook, People will be mourning the ruin of the temple. But I'm going to ask you a question. Should we be mourning the destruction of the house, which many prophets said would be destroyed, or should we mourn the prophets who were persecuted, some killed, who spoke out against that entire system? Some were in prison, some persecuted, and some killed. And I ask you this: who killed the prophets? Shabbat Shalom, Shavua Tov. Thank you for your support. We're going into a Zoom discussion. I know some of you have some comments, some questions, and let's talk about from Balaam to Jesus, from blessing to bloodshed, who killed the prophets? I'll see you in a few minutes.